So good afternoon, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here with you. I come to this issue not from one of survivorship, but as a caregiver, actually. Victoria is my partner, and 5 years ago, she was diagnosed with ductal carcinoma in her left breast. And at that time, she'd had a persistent itch that bothered her quite a bit, and she went to the doctors, and they said, "Oh, you're fine. Go ahead home." So she came home and said, "That's great. Wow, wonderful." But she said, "Something still doesn't feel quite right to me." So she persisted, and ultimately she got the correct diagnosis. And as a caregiver, it was amazing to watch that happen. It was amazing to watch the power of her persistence and the power of her asking questions. She was quite relentless when it came to getting answers that satisfied her and made her feel at ease and feel comfortable. And again, as a caregiver, it was really impressive and an important lesson for me to see the power of advocating for yourself. And our panelists here are going to talk about that a little bit as well. We primarily want to hear from all of you here in our audience here in Manhattan and our many viewers on the live stream. So I'm going to ask each of you just to describe for 5 minutes or so your journey and maybe one piece of advice you give to folks about advocating for themselves when it comes to your treatment. So, Donna, you want to start?
Me to start? I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in October of 2012. I was expected to live about 4 months after I was diagnosed. I had a PCP that was just amazing. I had not one symptom when I was diagnosed with lung cancer. She found a little bitty knot on my collarbone and sent me for a CAT scan. She was really instrumental for me in helping me navigate the whole health care system. I was one of those kind of people that never went to the doctor, and the only reason that I did go was because I was gaining weight and I wanted some medicine for thyroid. That's what I self-diagnosed, but instead I had lung cancer. I had regular chemo, carboplatin, Avastin, and Alimta for about 7 months, and it quit working. And my oncologist told me I could either get on another drug that was even worse to have as far as the chemotherapy went, or I could consider a clinical trial, which I decided to do. He suggested one hospital for me to go to. They did not respond to me in the way that I really thought they should. I thought, in my life, a week was the same as 3 years in their lives. They didn't call me back in a week, so back to the PCP I went, and she hooked me up with a NCI designated hospital in Dallas, which is where I joined the clinical trial. I didn't do a really good job, I don't guess, of self-advocating, other than that when I didn't feel like I was getting the response that I should, I did go back to my source of help and got her to hook me up with the place that I thought would help me the most. So that was basically, I got into the clinical trial in July of 2013, and I remain in that clinical trial today.
Great. One piece of advice? Do you have a piece of advice for folks, or a piece of advice for people?
Yeah, a piece of advice for me would be that if it seems like you're not getting the answers that you need, keep on searching. And the other piece of advice is you got to trust your doctor they've got your life in your hands. So if you don't trust your doctor, get another one.
Find somebody you can trust.
Amen.
Absolutely. Great advice. Great advice. Ariella, how about you?
All right. So I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma going into my junior year of college, 2010. It's supposed to be one of the good cancers. In theory, after some chemotherapy, maybe some radiation, you're done, and you can begin your survivorship, cycle. That unfortunately did not happen in my case, But I was extremely lucky to have the support network that I have, my family, my friends, oh my gosh, countless folks in my parents' networks and my friends' networks, my school, who, supported me throughout the entire duration of it, even 6 years out now. After the initial chemotherapy, frontline treatment that didn't work out, then the salvage treatment, other treatments, clinical trials. I think one of the key moments where I act as an advocate for myself was in 2012 when I was exhausted all the options at my current hospital. My doctor put together a short list of different trials around the country that seemed interesting and could be worthwhile, but it was ultimately up to me to make that decision. That's terrifying. But I knew that I had to make the most educated guess that I could make. So I fell back on my econ background, threw together a cost-benefit analysis, made a nice little decision matrix. I had my weighted parameters. I decided I would rank all of them. Like, some of them were personal ones, like location. Do I want to be in Chicago or do I want to be in the middle of nowhere, Missouri? No. Some weights are more important than others, obviously. But that was a helpful framework. I reached out to other experts. My parents reached out to other experts to help me. I then became my own clinical trial consultant, and I would fly to different locations and meet with these doctors and try and get in on one of their cohorts. I was fortunate enough to, be selected for one of the trials after making some tough decisions. Ultimately, that trial that I chose didn't end up, curing me, but it did keep my disease stable, and it bought me enough time to get to the next trial, and then the next chemo, and then the next trial, which ended up being the immunotherapy trial that has given me the amount of time I've had now. That was in 2013. That was nivolumab, which I found out I've been pronouncing incorrectly the past 3 years, so it's good to finally get clarification on that. So I'm really grateful for everyone that has helped me navigate this extremely overwhelming and challenging environment, the physicians, the friends and family and everyone else, and have gotten me here today. And I feel extremely blessed to be able to be here today and be able to talk about it now and with all of you. So feeling pretty good.
That's great. Piece of advice, Ariella?
Oh, piece of advice. Ask for help sooner. Don't wait. I don't know if any of you folks are also fiercely independent types that think you can figure it all out yourself. I got this. Don't worry, everybody. No, you really should tell people that you're overwhelmed and that you're struggling. It is not a personal failing to not be able to manage a cancer diagnosis by yourself. So that would be my number one piece of advice. Second, to echo many folks who spoke earlier, gather all the information possible. Even just sending personal notes to physicians or researchers in the space, a lot of them are super eager to talk about something they've been geeking out over for years. You can follow them on Twitter, find them on Facebook, join groups, talk to the people who really care about this stuff. You can learn a lot.
Terrific. Thank you, Ariella. Appreciate it. TJ?
All right, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to start with my piece of advice. My piece of advice to you is to hire Arielle to be your personal consultant for clinical trials. You guys got a lot of my background earlier. Stage 4 melanoma when I was 37, kind of given that 2 years sentence. And I guess really my piece of advice, to start off with, and I'll give the sort of background, is that, it's not a sentence, and there is there is hope, there is research, and that you shouldn't take what a doctor tells you as law, and that's what's going to happen to you, because it doesn't always happen the way that it should in probability. And that's what I think trials end up showing, that there are things that are probable, but in the end, in statistics they call it an N of 1. You are one person. Kind of how I ended up, my sort of trial story started with trying to find the first trial and not taking standard of care chemotherapy as my only option, and it ended up going to one of the best cancer centers in America and having my first trial, be the first patient. That sounds great, except when the trial contract isn't signed. And I waited for over a month. You know, if you think a week's a long time, a month is forever. To the point where the oncologist told me that we should start on Plan B because we don't know how long it's going to take to sign a contract. And I said, no, you told me this was the best chance I had to see my kids grow up. I'm not giving up because a piece of paper isn't signed. And I don't care. My wife's a lawyer. I'm like, I don't care about these lawyers. That wasn't acceptable, and it shouldn't be. And that's part of the attitude I had, is that it's not going to be. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for medicine to find me and for me to fit in their schedule. And we pushed it through. The contract did get signed because I got on the phone and started calling places it was signed at, or it was not signed at, and. The oncologist 2 days later, he's like, I don't know what you did, but they signed the contract. So, that first part was, I went and I found where the trial was, and I pushed. The converse to that is that when the first trial didn't, I was considered clinically a non-responder, and when it didn't work, we're in the same situation where we have a second trial that's coming up, and the contract wasn't signed for that one either. And I'm like, we're not gonna do that again. So we went from the big NCI designated cancer center to a very small local hospital because they did have a trial open, and we were able to find it with the help of an advocacy group. And that was a bit of a conundrum. You're leaving some of the best doctors in the world, colleagues of Dr. Wolchuk's, and going to a center that didn't have a melanoma specialist in-house. But they did have the trial that we looked for, and we had vetted our options, and that was the best option for me. So somewhat controversial to quite a few people that we went there, and it worked. And that's the that's the happy ending to this, is that it did work. But I don't think it would have if I continued to listen to doctors just tell me this is your first option.
Absolutely. Lots of good advice, guys. Lots of good advice. Let's open it up for questions. Yeah.
Who had to move to do a trial? Approximately how long was the trial, and how disruptive was that to your lives to transplant to another location?
Did you move for your trial?
Well, in my case, I was able to go back and forth from the trial site to where I was. There is this organization called Corporate Angels that we found out during the process that helped fund the flights, so I could go from home and do local blood tests and then just meet with them. I think it was like once every few weeks. I was also fortunate that the drug delivery method was, it was oral medication, so I was able to get those sent to my home and take them there. I know that for some folks, depending on how the trial is designed, that might not be super feasible, but that's what I was able to do. I would just go for a few days and then come back.
I did. We relocated for a few months to the Tampa area, and it was very disruptive. So when we did come back to that small cancer center, it was nice to be home. But I don't, looking back, I don't regret, even though the trial failed and it didn't seem to work for me. That was our best option, and at that point, we were able to do it with the support of a lot of people, make it happen, and it was something I would do again, and I would encourage anyone to do, is to find the best treatment. Mine was 4 months. That one was 4 months. So that one had a very defined beginning and end.
Yeah. For mine, you could have been on for a few years, but unfortunately, I was not successful with it, so I was only on for a few months.
Mine has been going on for 3 years and will be going on indefinitely until it quits working. And mine happens to be local, so I had no transportation issues at all.
If it quits working, if.
Yes. I don't intend for it to quit.
There we go. Thank you for the question. Over here.
For the lady that's been on the trial for 3 years, do they have any flexibility
Just hold for the microphone, please, so our listeners online can hear you.
Cut and dry about what you have to do. I'm just wondering how much flexibility now that you're on it 3 years, like if you have to follow their protocol to a T, or they give you a little bit of leeway, just so you can live your life.
No leeway. It's just as inflexible today as it was the day I started it. So, I mean, I'm supposed to go for an infusion every 2 weeks, and on occasion we push that to every 3 weeks. And when I first started, I had to have CAT scans every 6 weeks, including getting to drink barium. And that's now every 3 months. They decided that I was doing well enough that we didn't have to look every 6 weeks. So I guess we've gotten a little bit more flexible, but not very much.
Along with that, also I'm on a long-term follow-up cycle. So when I was receiving treatment, there were set dates and times and parameters. You get these blood tests at this time. There would usually be a couple day time window. So maybe I couldn't come in at Monday when they wanted me to come in. I could maybe go in that Wednesday, depending on the range. And then now in follow-up, I have so much flexibility. It's amazing. It's amazing to be at this point where you can be like, I can't come in this week. I will come in week after and I'll get that CAT scan. So I consider that a privilege.
My doctor only works 2 afternoons a week, so that also causes a little bit, he's a researcher when he's not seeing patients. He works more than 2 afternoons. So that also limits the flexibility. But it's okay, it's working, so I'm okay with the inflexibility.
I know there's a lot of, you see clinical trials, phase 1 and phase 2. If someone's looking for a clinical trial, is there something online to find them, and what's the difference between the 1 or the 2?
Resources for trials, resources to find trials.
It's been a couple times. Phase 1 is very early. It measures dosage, I think it is. And I should have a doctor up here telling this. But and phase 2 then starts measuring the efficacy, how it works. There's a lot of resources online. Clinicaltrials.gov is sort of the root database for all of this. The CRI's got their own trial finder, and that's probably the best place to start. I would start with some people right outside here is probably the best first step.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I echo that. That was what I go clinicaltrials.gov or asking physicians. So I'm sure you might know, asking other doctors who work at other locations, talking to other patients, through these communities, through these advocacy groups, see what they tried, look up the name on clinicaltrial.gov, see if there's an open access nearby you, talk about their side effects, get a feel for it, do a lot of quantitative research. Qualitative, sorry, wrong.
Some of the local advocacy, or not local, but the national advocacy groups too, like with me with lung cancer, there's a few different national advocacy groups that also have a lot of information about clinical trials. And just coming to places like this, you may hear about something.
More questions for our panel here?
Just a question. So I don't know if in your experiences whether you've had both chemo experience and immunotherapy experience, but I'm just wondering how different the 2 experiences might have been with regard to toxicities or symptoms from those 2 therapy approaches.
Oh, wow. The difference between chemo and immunotherapy is night and day. I'm one of your really lucky individuals who have had very limited side effects from immunotherapy. The only thing that's really happened to me is that my thyroid quit working correctly. Other than that, I have a little tiny bit of fatigue that's overcome if it's something I really want to do instead of be tired. Chemotherapy, I didn't do well with chemotherapy at all. I was one of those people that the anti-nausea drugs didn't work on. And so I had 3-week cycle, and I was really only sick about 3 days out of that 3 week, but I had that horrible fatigue that you could only walk about 10 feet before you just couldn't lift your lead feet anymore. But for me, there's absolutely just no comparison between chemotherapy, and traditional chemotherapy and immunotherapy.
I had a similar experience with, my side effects with chemotherapy. They run the gamut. All the typical. The hair loss, the intense fatigue, nausea, vomiting, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And like I had, the starter basic chemotherapy all the way through to like the mustard gas derivative stuff. So it's like, there'd be days when I just didn't feel I was able to get out of bed, or the similar, walking 10 feet was the maximum. So quality of life was limited. I was still able to, go to school, graduate, and all of that, because I boxed out time. Okay, I will be able to focus for these 2 hours. The rest of the time I will sleep. Immunotherapy, completely different. I was able to start working again. That was awesome. I was able to be outside of the house for many hours in a day. I felt comfortable getting on the subway and walking in the street and not feeling like I was going to pass out. So I had considerably more freedom and independence with immunotherapy. And that, of course, made my quality of life a lot better. There were a couple, isolated things. I had some pneumonitis, like inflammation of the lungs, some coughing. I did have a liver enzyme spike. There was some pain with that, but it settled down after a few days. So, I also think it's much as Donna said, night and day, the side effects of the two.
And I've only had a very tiny bit of chemo as part of the one trial, so I don't have a very good compare and contrast, but I can tell you that I've watched many patients who are on chemo and struggle, and I've seen myself go from someone who lost 50 pounds during my first trial to being able to do bike rides and exercise and coach my kids' soccer team. And it is an amazing feeling to be like, yeah, I'm doing this, and oh yeah, I do have cancer too. I went for treatment. I had my treatment on Thursday, and I'm here today. So.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions for our panel? Here in the front. Whoa.
Watch here.
I'm really happy that you guys have not had side effects in immunotherapy. I think it's important, though, for people who don't know that there's another side to that some people do have extreme side effects from immunotherapy, especially the combination clinical trials. So, for example, my husband was able to go through 3 rounds of the treatment with the combination, ended up in the emergency room of a hospital. He couldn't function, everything shut down, and it took him months and months and months with steroid treatments to a year later, now finally he's not 100% back to functioning, but as he says, he's alive. And the immunotherapy has had a positive effect on the cancer, but he's still not functioning well. So I just not to negate your experience at all, but it's important for people to know there's another side to that and everything in between.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Absolutely.
Real quick, because it's something that Donna said earlier about not going to the doctor. When you get on immunotherapy, you have to be somewhat hyper-vigilant because your immune system is hyper-charged. It is working overtime. So little things that you might blow off, you need to be aware that could be an issue. And, it becomes a little more of a pain to call the doctor, but it's a lot worse than ending up in the ICU. So, if you go down the route of immunotherapy, pay attention to your body, pay attention to what you put into it, what it does. If there's a reaction, it's not just going to be something you can blow off.
Absolutely.
And I think at this point in time, because it is a fairly new treatment, like when I started complaining to my doctor that I was so tired and I kept gaining more and more and more weight, and he just kept blowing me off. And so finally, he got tired of hearing me talk about I'm so fat and I'm so tired. He finally did a graph and he saw, oh, maybe I need to do some thyroid testing. At that point in time, he hadn't even considered the fact, now it's kind of more common, but because immunotherapy is so new, that doctors don't know all of the side effects that might come about. So it's imperative to keep your healthcare provider informed, I think, about every single solitary little symptom that you might have.
Absolutely.
I completely agree.
All right, let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much.